The Prime Minister is letting down the Defence Force by not stepping up and not speaking with China, either through the ambassador or directly with Beijing. And do you accept China saying that that Australia was impeding of approaching their borders?
No, I think we need to be very clear about this. There are a few points to make here. One is that the Prime Minister's first job is to take care of our country, to make sure Australians are safe, and we do that by making sure that we've got a strong Australian Defence Force and our security and intelligence and policing agencies are well resourced and are defending us 24/7. And I think there are many men and women of the Australian Defence Force at the moment who see the Prime Minister as very weak, and that his first instinct wasn't to stand up for the Australian men and women of the Australian Defence Force is quite unforgivable. I don't know what game he's playing at, but he's finally come around to a position that he should have adopted when we first learnt of this circumstance. And as for the propaganda that China continuously puts out, we need to make sure that we call it out and that the Prime Minister says that what is being said here is completely incorrect. Our chopper was in international waters, and the rule of law needs to apply equally to Australia as it does to China, as it does to the United States or Canada or any other country. And this propaganda that's put out needs to be rebuffed, and the Prime Minister needs to stand up and show the leadership that the Australian public would expect and demand from their leader.
And just one more, are you concerned by the illegal boats that have arrived in the Torres Strait?
Well, I just think when the Australian government says that they're in favour of Operation Sovereign Borders, it's not the coalition's version of Operation Sovereign Borders supported by the Prime Minister. So he's removed the temporary protection leg, which is a pull factor. We now know with the migration issue that's before us at the moment, where 151 people have been released from prison, people know that if you're a non-citizen and you come to our country under a Labor government, even if you've committed serious crimes against Australian citizens, as we saw with Danette in WA, you've got the chance to stay here in our country. So that is a pull factor as well. And I think if you look at the money that the government's withdrawn from the Australian Border Force and from the Australian Defence Force, you've got money that's been taken away from aerial surveillance and on-water days that Australian Border Force have there in detecting these threats. It shows that Operation Sovereign Borders is light at best under Anthony Albanese. And again, it just shows that you can't have weakness as Prime Minister when it comes to national security matters. And I just don't think the Prime Minister's got the backbone to stand up to people smugglers or to our adversaries or others who would seek to do us harm. And that's why we're seeing crime epidemics in our country at the moment, because the Prime Minister should be showing leadership and he's not.
The government has announced more than $90 million in funding to boost the number of skilled workers in the construction and housing sector. Is this something that you welcome?
Well, we want to see more workers in the construction sector, and we support measures that will get houses built more quickly, because we know that the government's brought in about 1 million people over the course of the last 2 years, the highest intake in our history, because the government has a policy which is a Big Australia policy, which Mr Albanese never told the public about before the election. And the trouble with bringing 1 million people in 2 years is that at the same time we've only built just over 200,000 homes, and that's why we've got a rental crisis. It's why people can't buy a house at the moment, and I think Australians, yes, want to see more houses built. We all do, but the Prime Minister is making terrible economic decisions, which is driving up inflation, which is why people's interest rates are higher, and also making it harder because they're supporting the CFMEU tactics, which are driving up the costs of building and construction, not just in the residential sector, but obviously the industrial and commercial sectors as well.